Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Evening.
Evening. Any news? Anybody can tell me something nice? No?
What's the plans for going back to base? Any news?
Well, the rest of the week is meant to be good weather. So for the rest of the week, we could stay in Tully's garden. But for as soon as the weather turns bad again, we're not doing this. This is a bit like thing. Chaim, do you want it to base this on?
Doesn't make a difference really to me. I'm very flexible.
What about you?
I'm not going out at the moment.
All right. Yehuda Stern?
Yeah, do it in base. Just keep it on Zoom so whoever can't come can still join in.
Hey, what about you? Would you come to base? No.
No.
And Shai, what about you?
Not really bothered.
Harvey, what about you? We're making an impromptu survey regarding joining us in base. You don't want to do at the moment.
No.
Right. So nobody so far said yes. I don't think a single one. Chaim, you didn't say yes, did you? You just said that you. So there's no
Whatever.
point.
No difference. No difference to me.
It's staying for next week or two.
Well, bit slightly actually, because I've got very itchy fingers when it comes to playing with a computer.
Oh.
It's easier.
Okay, but Daf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph. I have to warn a little bit that we're going to have quite a lot of Gemaras which are hard to translate and hard to relate to because they deal with a society which we're not used to. If anybody wants to come to this hut, then you're welcome to come on the nights that it's not in Tully's garden, but as I can see now that somebody's knocking on, I think it's good evening, Moshe. Says the Gemara, Daf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top. The Mishnah tells us that that animals and birds have skins, they have hides. The Mishnah is referring to the issa of Shabbos, of beating them. If you beat a bird, then because it's got a skin, the skin keeps the blood from leaving, and what happens is by bruising it, you're either issa deraisa on Shabbos, either the issa deraisa of tzeveh, you're coloring the skin, alternatively, you're either the issa deraisa of netilas neshama, of causing a form of death. That is what the Mishnah is referring to. The Mishnah says they've got a hide, they've got a skin. The Gemara is going to find another nafkimina, another practical application to the fact that birds have skins. Says the Gemara, so if you get a kosher bird like a pigeon, skin it, you can write your tefillin on it. The halacha is you can only write it on skin, you can't write it on flesh, you can't write it on meat. So what are you trying to teach me that birds have skins? It's our Mishnah. The Mishnah says that you wound them, you chayv. And as we explained in the Mishnah, something that has no skin, something that has no hide, when you beat it, you're not chayav, because what happens is the blood just moves from place to place. It's like a cup of blood, where you're just moving the blood around. It's not like you're moving the blood out of its position to a new place. So therefore, the fact the Mishnah says you're chayav is obviously a proof that it's got skin. There's a chiddush. Since it's got lots of little holes, the skin of a bird has hundreds of little holes. The reason is, it's all the feathers are coming out. So you might have thought, that you're not allowed to write your tefillin because it's got lots of little holes. And the halacha is that when you write tefillin, a small break in the letter is possible. So let's say you're writing the letter Aleph, and there's a cut in the letter Aleph, it's possible. So all the little holes in the skin of the bird should make it possible. If the ink goes across the hole, fills the hole, and it doesn't break the ink, it doesn't matter. So that's a very big chiddush. From our Mishnah, we see that birds have a skin. But from him, he's adding that you're even allowed to write your tefillin on it. Why? Because the fact that it's got little holes does not disturb, because it doesn't create a break in the letter. Because since it's such a small hole, you can fill up the ink and continue. If you make a tiny little hole in a piece of paper, it will not break the letter. A big hole will break the letter. And the chiddush is the little holes of a bird doesn't make it possible. Mosiv Abzera. The Torah tells us that if a poor man can't afford an animal and he wants to bring a korban to Hashem, he can bring either a bird or a mincha. And what does he do? We split it, we cut it, break it in half, and we put the entire bird onto the mizbeach. Now we have a principle that the hides were never put on the mizbeach. What happened to the hides of a korban oil? Does anybody know? Kohanim should know. No, the hides of a korban oil were given to the kohanim. So kohanim would get was one of the 24 matnas kuna from this week's parasha. So one of the feathers they got was the hide, and if we say by a korban oil that they got it, I'm not sure. There's somebody banging up. If I don't check, it's maybe my wife can get up again. Oh, yeah, throw me the tie, maybe. But again, that means like this. We just said in our Mishnah that the birds have skins, and therefore you can write a sefer Torah on your tefillin on the skin of a bird. Asks the Gemara, but the Torah tells us that when a person brings a bird, we put the skin on the mizbeach. Now we know that normally skins don't go on the mizbeach; they go to the kohanim. So that you put the skin on the mizbeach. If it's a proper skin, how can the pasuk allow it? It is a skin, but the Torah allows it. Now Torah asks a very important question. It's good to remember. Besides for the skin of the bird, what else did they burn of the bird? Is the feathers of the bird. Have you ever burnt feathers? Rashi tells us there's nothing worse than the smell of burnt feathers. And why did they burn it? Why
Not do it for their name to show.
Oh, that the poor
show
person
that
should feel that his present is big. If you start plucking all the feathers of the bird, there's hardly anything on his back. So this is if we allow the feathers, so of course you can allow the skin. What's the Gemara's kasha? So the Gemara says no, because we see after all that the hair on the goat's beard would go on the mizbeach and not his skin. So the Gemara have a minute that skin was a special issa. Something Gemara says ikadami, another version of this of the past Gemara, which is very very similar. We've also learned that the skin of a bird is a proper skin. If it's a proper hide, it's not flesh, it's not meat, and it's a that's what possibly needs to include it. If it's not skin, why is it possible to include it? You need it. Since it's got a lot of holes in, therefore maybe I didn't want you to put in these. Let's just summarize what we've learned. Our Mishnah tells us that birds have hide. It's not just flesh, it's also a hide, not like a cockroach. A cockroach does not have a hide, it's only got flesh. If you beat a cockroach on Shabbos and you give it a bruise, actually you can't give it a bruise according to the Mishnah, because it's not practically possible. It doesn't have any skin to hold back the blood. But if you kick a cockroach on Shabbos, you're not chayav because of chayvel or tzivea, etc. Birds do. The Gemara adds that you can even write your tefillin. What's the chiddush that you can write your tefillin? Even though it's got small holes, very good. Even if it's got small holes. Says the Gemara, there's another halacha, that you actually burn the skin, the hide of a korban olah is burnt on his back. What's the chiddush of that? The chiddush of that is that even though you might think it's off-putting because it's made out of a lot of pieces, and you can't say with the survivor that it's not skin, because maybe the tail was malbit, even though normally skins don't go on his back, the skin of the korban olah does go on his back. You get a salmon for Yom Tov, you skin it. Can you write your tefillin on the skin of a kosher fish? Let's wait for Eliyahu to tell us. What will Eliyahu come to tell us? So, Rashi explains, if you look in Rashi, it's about 10 lines from the narrow lines. We're never going to ask Eliyahu Navi Hetav Issa. It's not up to Eliyahu Navi, it's up to us to decide. So all Eliyahu Navi can teach us is technicality. He can't teach us halacha. Eliyahu Navi can't teach us halacha. He can only teach us technicalities. So maybe he'll teach us, is it called skin? Is it a real hide? Is it flesh, right? Some people won't eat the skin of a salmon. Some people would. We see it does have flesh. Someone said that this is important halacha. The halacha is that if a person has shown as a dead in a house, every single thing in the house becomes tummy. if something is in a cup and the cup has got a lid on, even the thing inside the cup is also tummy. The reason is, let's say you've got a glass cup. I don't know if this is glass, but let's say it was glass. So then what would happen is the cup becomes tummy and it conveys tumah to the thing. It doesn't block tumah. The exception is, if the cup is made out of something that cannot become tummy, then the things inside it get blocked. Tumah does not flow. That means if let's say there's a dead person in this house, and then there's glass which can become tummy, it doesn't save the thing from becoming tummy. But if it's something which cannot become tummy, then it stops tumah from flowing in. The halacha is, anything made out of a goat can become tummy. The Torah says, klei izim. So if let's say you take a hoof of a goat and you hollow out from it a cup, and then you put the cup in a dead person's house and you put water or bread inside it, would the bread become tummy?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Because the cup can become tummy. But if you make it out of skin of a fish, it does not become tummy. So we see that...
Is it the same tumah? Will it be an avatuma? Will the cup be an avatuma? And then it conveys the tumah, so it'll be a rishon in the tumah.
No, there will be an avatuma for the food inside, because once the cup can't stop tumah, so then it becomes tummy because it's inside the oil hames. You have what I'm saying? So be avatuma. So, somebody said, or if you make something out, let's say your wife makes fish for Friday night. So what do? You take the bones, you don't throw them out, you save them to make out of them bowls and cups. And then what happens is you use that cup, so that saves with tumah. The only way they can be saved is only if it's bone or if it's the skin. But flesh can't. It's a raya that it is real flesh. It's real hide. The only thing Eliyahu Hanavi can teach us is whether the bad smell of fish is so strong that after you dry it out, it's still smelly and you can't write tefillin on it, or whether the smell goes away. That is what Eliyahu Hanavi can teach us. It's very important halacha. Eliyahu Hanavi never teaches us halacha. Eliyahu Hanavi only teaches us practicality. I saw today in Sefer he writes that, on this Gemara he writes actually, what do you say? They said the Eliyahu can't teach us anything. The Gemara Bava Metzia says, so Teku is that he'll tell us, technicality, etc. You can't pass them for an Issa and Heta. The Gemara Bava Metzia says if two people leave something, let's say you both give me a can of Coke to look after, and then a month later, one of the two of you give me a can of Coke, and then the two of you come and say, it's mine. So what's the halacha? Does anybody know the halacha? You wait for Eliyahu Hanavi to tell you. Question is, how can Eliyahu Hanavi tell us he can't pass this better? So he says an interesting thing. I've forgotten the name of the Sefer, I'll come back to it later, but he says that what will happen is when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, people will be too embarrassed to lie, and then people will end up saying the truth. I can't remember, I think it's Chub Meir, I think it's the Sefer is called. Okay. A little interesting story to do with this whole Gemara. Shmuel and Kana, two Talmidei Chachamim, have a Yosvi Agudah D'Na Malka. They were sitting by the border of the royal river. There was a royal river that went right through Babel, and they were sitting by the border. Chazinu Lemaya, they called Dolu V'Akiri. They saw the water that was stirred and dirty. Omalei Shmuel Lekana. Shmuel says to Kana, Gava Rabba Ka'osi Mimarova. A great Talmid Chacham is coming from Eretz Yisrael, the Chayish B'Moy, and he's got a stomach ache. We got Dolu Maya, the Kabule Ape Kame, and the water is coming to greet him. Zil, go, Toile Akan Kamne, smell him, smell his bottom, meaning test him if it's a Talmid Chacham. Ozar Ashkechele Rav. This is a very interesting story. Rav was a huge Talmid Chacham. He was a Talmid of who? Who was he a Talmid of? Of Yehuda Nossi and Ubchia. And he came to Babel and he set up a yeshiva, one of the biggest yeshivas in Babel he set up, and he lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is the Gemara that describes Rav coming from Eretz Yisrael to Babel. And Shmuel could see that Rav was coming. How could he tell that Rav was coming? He saw that the water was wavy and that the water was dirty. And Shmuel understood that must be that Rav is coming. How do you deduce that? How would you work that out from the water being wavy and dirty? So Rashi points out a few things. The first thing Rashi points out, there was no wind. Because had there been a wind, obviously the water would have been stirred and there'd be big waves. There was no wind. Furthermore, Rashi says that when the person is on the boat and needs to relieve himself, it's very hard to find a private spot. If there are very big waves, the waves protect and make a modesty, they make a wall around the boat for a person to relieve himself without anybody seeing. Furthermore, he says the water being dirty was symbolic of the fact that Rav was in pain. The royal river of Bava, the big river of Bava, became all muddy because of the fact that Rav was in pain. Now, so that's how Rashi explains it. Rashi says further that the big advantage of the big waves is that if he needed to wipe himself after relieving himself, it would be easier to get hold of the water. If you're on a big deck of a boat, how do you get water? So the water had the high waves. So that's how Rashi explains it. Teresa explains, he has a different gilsa. And Teresa says like this, that Shmuel heard that a great person's coming. And he never worked it out from the water. Only Shmuel saw that the water was dirty. Now Shmuel was very famous. What was Shmuel very famous for being?
Doctor.
A doctor. He was a very big doctor. And he saw that the water was murky. And he realized that whoever was coming, because he heard that great person was coming, was very likely to drink some of the water. So he realized that whoever would come would have a stomachache. Not that he had a stomachache, but that he would get a stomachache from drinking the water, because the water had been mixed up so much. So Shmuel wanted to know, is it necessary for him as a doctor to go and heal him? So he wanted to know, he asked Kana, go and check him out. If it's a Talmud Chacham, should I go and bother and find ways to heal him? Okay. Omale. So Kana decided to faher Rav to see if it's a Talmud Chacham. Rav did not like this faher, as we will see. But he asked him like this. How do you know you can't use, let's say, a lion skin? How do you know you can't use a lion skin to write your tefillin? You have to use a cow or sheep skin. Why? Because the Pasuk says by the Pasuk by tefillin, in order that the words of Hashem should be in your mouth. Only for something which you're allowed to eat. So from there we learn that you're only allowed to write tefillin on something that you're allowed to eat. So he asked him another question. This is a Gemara Niddah. How do we know that the blood of a niddah is red? Maybe it's a different color. Because it says in the Pasuk that they saw red water, kadam, like blood. It's a famous drasha. He says, if you'd ask any child in the street, how do you know the blood is red? They'll say to you, because every time a child falls down and bleeds, it's always red. But by Torah, there's no such thing as relying on anything but Torah. You have to have a makor for Torah for everything. Everything the Torah says. He said the story. There was once a bacha walking with him. It was a couple of days after Sukkot, and it started getting cold. And he said to the bacha, why didn't you wear a coat? So the bacha said, when I left the house, it looked warm. I thought it would be a warm day. So what did he say to him? How could you say such a thing? The Torah and Hilchos Sukkah writes that always after Yom Kippur, it always gets cold. So surely, without listening to the weather forecast, you should look up the Torah. If the Torah says it's going to get cold, it gets cold. So how do you know blood is red? Because the Pasuk says so. How do you know Bismillah is by the eva of a man? Maybe it's cutting off somewhere else. Nema kan or losoi, nema la'alon or losoi. Ma la'alon there is referring to a tree. Dovash ois a tree, something that creates fruit. Afkan dovash ois a tree is the place which a person can become fruitful for. Bedwa ima liboy, dichsiv maltimus olas levavchem, the same word olas. Ima ozdoi dichsiv ne olo oznom, that the ears are blocked up, the hearts are blocked up. And it says more, don in olosoi, tamo, no olosoi, tamo, and don in olosoi, tamo, olosoi, molash in tamo. That means in both places it says the word olosoi with a vov. And that's a better gzeil shova than from the place of olosoi to olas. Here in both places, by the fruit tree, it says olosoi. Are you cold? No. If you're cold, then again, it says olosoi by bismillah, and it says olosoi by a fruit tree. So therefore, we learn that it's something fruitful. Masha'en kain by the heart and by the ear, it doesn't say olosoi, it says olas. And therefore, we say that it has to be something comparable to the fruit, something which is fruitful. So that was the end of Kana's Faher. He asked him 3 questions if you work it out. How do you write tefillin on something kosher? How do you know blood is red? And how do you know that Bismillah is on the eva of a man? Omale. So Rav said to Kana, "My shimcha, what is your name?" He said, Kana. Omale. Hey Rav, to typically Kana be'ene. A horn should grow out of your eye, a cataract. Meaning that a big cataract grew, and the Gemara says it did indeed grow out of his eye, not here in Moab Kama, as a punishment for questioning Rav's greatness. That for hair was no good.
Why did Rav want to know his name? Like,
No, because he was annoyed with him, so he wanted to curse him something similar to his name. The Soif afterwards, Shmuel wanted to make him better. And how did Shmuel want to make him better? So Shmuel was a doctor. So he gave him bread made out of barley, the kasset halsna, and a cup of halsna, which is fish and flour mixed together. And he gave him beer. He didn't show him where the bathroom was. So he had a huge desire to relieve himself because all these foods cause diarrhea. So all these foods that Shmuel gave him would cause a person to want to relieve himself. But Shmuel didn't show him the bathroom. So therefore he was forced to hold on. And that caused him to eventually have very, very strong diarrhea. And then that way, he became better. Light, Rav, one who caused me pain, should never have sons. Shmuel never had sons. His sons all died. He never had any sons surviving him. He only had daughters. Even though, Rav was upset.
How does that help his eye?
no.
This is a new person. First he cursed Kalna for verhemming him.
Shmuel trying to make Kalna better.
No, Shmuel tried to make Rav better from the stomachache. Sorry.
Why did Khan get?
Again, Rav had a stomachache. Rav had a stomachache. How do you know Rav had a stomachache? Because when Shmuel saw the water coming down, he saw the big waves, he understood that there was something coming down the stomachache. Once he wanted to heal him from the stomachache, so therefore he made him.
Why should Khan suffer?
Because with the person, what the Mishnah Novice says, you have to be careful with Talmidei Chacham. You have to be very careful with whatever they do. They say Shmuel Brevda suffered a very, 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 very lot in his life. Very, very lot. Terrible souls. And we see back to the story that Shmuel Brevda told him. It says like this, Ishmael Pirish, that what happened was he was at Kufa, he decided to go to America. And he went and told Chazkel Levenstein, I'm going to America because this is the idea. His Rebbe told him. Chazkel Levenstein was annoyed with him for a few seconds and calmed down. And he felt that his whole life suffering was because he managed to annoy Chazkel Levenstein. Actually, I happen to be reading biographies of the Ger Rebbes we speak. It's fascinating, you know, it's off the point. Because did you know the Chidush Yomim had 13 children and that 12 of them died in their youth. Only one of them lived. They all died in his lifetime. Only one of them he lived to actually marry off. And the Sfas Emes himself, that's the Chidush Yomim. His grandson was Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes himself had 10 children, of which I can't remember how many. 4 died in the youth, and 5 or something. No, another few were killed by the Nazis in Machshmon. He also suffered terribly. I just said very, very quickly, I saw a story, I just said for chinuch purposes. The Sfas Emes barely remembered his father. His father was 8 when he was nifter, yeah? And what happened was, the Sfas Emes once said to his mother, I don't like groats, it's a kind of porridge. And the only memory he had of his father, because his father was nifter when he was 8, his father wasn't so famous. His father died young. And his father said to the mother, okay, so for the next 40 days, the only thing you should ever cook him is groats. He wanted to teach his son that there's no such thing as you don't eat for pleasure or not for pleasure. You eat what Shmuel provides you. So he ended up for 40 days, that's the only thing that his mother cooked. Okay. So we're also like this, Kitanoi. Now we're going back to the point. How do you know that Bris Milah is in that place? Has to be a place which creates food to be abisha. Nosan omayne tzorich haroim ev ol zocha a meol olos asher yom l'spasar losei. Mokim shenikim ben zachus in that. Since the Torah says a meol olo, we're discussing something which is the difference between male and female, and therefore that is where Bris Milah is. You can use the kosher Torah. That is, if you know a deer which is kosher, you can write. I've actually heard of people wearing tefillin made out of deer skin. Even if the cow died, the cow is a treifa, it doesn't have to be shechted. You can also use that cow for tefillin. When you have to wrap it up with the hair of a kosher animal. When it goes begidon, you have to use the sinew of a kosher animal. And that's halacha that you have to use the hair and the sinews of a kosher animal. You can't use a dog or lion or anything like that. Of course, you can't use a treifa one. You can't use their hair, but it was begidon, you can't use their sinews. Because once asked Rabbi Shua Gal Siminayin, how do you know that? He replied to him the same answer the Rav told him. The Rav said later, man you only can write fin on something which is allowed to eat. And a matter about the village of Shefas Ali Kosu, so don't write it on an animal which hasn't been shechted because you're not allowed to eat it. Two people deserve to die. One a king killed, and one was killed by executioner. Which one is greater? Of course, the one that the king killed. So if a Nebelev Shreifa is killed by Hashem because it happens to die, a Shechita is shechted by a Sheichet. So who is more great? A cow which was shechted by Hashem or a cow which was shechted by Hashem or by a Sheichet? Obviously, the cow by Hashem, so therefore it's better. And a matter Yochlu, so you should eat it. You're not allowed to. But Kalos, indeed, what you argued is very good. You said, well, like touche in French. What you said is a good argument. Indeed, that is a good argument, and therefore that's how we know. So that's how we know the Vedas and Shreif, that you're allowed to write filling on the Veda Shreifak of an animal, but you're not allowed to on a non-kosher. Says the Mishnah, in Hilmi b'Shabbos, it's not allowed to make brine on Shabbos because it's a form. It's like me'abed. It's only also with Rabbanon. It's like me'abed. What is Hilmi? What type of chesed base now? What is Hilmi? Hilmi is salt water. Hilmi brine. You're not allowed to make brine on Shabbos. The way you what?
Brine fish juice? Or
No, salt water. Very, very thick. Very thick.
tuna, you get in brine. Is that
Yes,
what it
that's salt water. Salt water. Water with a lot of salt. Now, why not? Why not? You're not, because the way you do ma'abed, the way you do ma'abed is to make a skin last for a very long time. So they would salt it. It's a tanning process. Is you do a lot of salt. So therefore, the tanning process, therefore, the Chazal midrabanon forbade people to do the tanning process because it would you're not allowed to make brine midrabanon because people then come to do real tanning on Shabbos. You're allowed to make salt water, which the Gemara asks, how can you say that? You just said you're not allowed to. When you're allowed to dip in your bread and you're allowed to add it to cooked food. That's the same thing. So you're not allowed to, because you're not allowed to make big, you're not allowed to make small. What is mutter, even according to Rabbi? If you add oil, either you add oil first to the water, or you add oil to the salt, and then you mix the water and the salt, then it doesn't matter. Again, if you put water into salt or salt into water, that's forbidden. But to put oil into water or oil into salt, and then mix it, water and oil, salt, it doesn't matter, because oil weakens the power of salt. And therefore, sometimes if you want to make a salad on Shabbos, before I talk about this, let's say about cucumbers, you want to put a lot of salt onto a cucumber salad, you have to first make sure that there's oil in the salad. If not, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. It says, Momaika Omar, how can you say such a thing, not to make salt water, and then say you're allowed to? Not allowed to make a lot. The reason is, if it would be awesome in that of course, it would be not the slightest difference to do a lot or a little. You're not allowed to cook a lot, you're not allowed to cook a little. But the reason why it's also to make salt water is not min hatir, it's midrabanan. Why is it also midrabanan? Because tanning, the way you make leather to last a long time is you salt it. So therefore, making salt water makes people think that you're allowed to do tanning. But only if you do a lot of salt water. If you make yourself a little bit of salt on the table and you dip your cucumber inside it or something, that's not going to remind people that they think to themselves, oh, well, that's the case, let me do tanning as well. Abisi says that both big and small, it's the same thing. Is he coming to be mekel or machmir? It means to be mekel. Since it doesn't say Abisi forbids it. The Sefer carries on. I don't understand what Yehuda meant and what he was trying to say. This is what's mutter according to Abisi. Obviously, Abisi was coming to forbid, and he only permits it if you add oil. It comes to forbid. What they used to do is, if you want to make a lot of salt water, what they would do is they would take a broken, gistra is a broken piece of flour. Let's say you had this cup of break. So they would add a lot of salt, put a lot of water. That's forbidden. You're allowed to make a bit of salt water. You can dip your bread. You can add it to cooked food. And this is, I don't understand the logic. Just because that's a lot and that's a little, you're allowed to do it. Yomu people will start saying, if you're going to allow people to make a little bit of salt water, not a lot of salt water, they'll come to say, well, if that's the case, I'll do a little bit of Shabbos. And that's awesome. What?
It's Xera and Xera.
It's not really, he understood that when Chazal made the Gzer, they wanted to differentiate between a lot or a little. Like Avova said, both are forbidden. You can put oil with salt and oil with water. You can't put water and salt together. You first have to add oil to one of the two things, and then afterwards you can mix it. As in sharp, snow, radish for Esrog Simon. The Gemara is going to bring 3 halachas, 3 gemaras about these 2 topics. You're not allowed to make sharp salt water. If an egg floats, that's no good. How much salt you need to put in the egg will float? 2/3 salt, 1/3 water, that's forbidden. When do people make this? For fish brine. Oh, I true name brine. What is this Negan and Maisa? Does anybody know? Say the night. Mishnah Bor brings down this Gemara. That what happens, he says in Mishnah Bor, that you have to make salt water before Pesach. Because you're not allowed to make salt water on Pesach. And it says in Mishnah Bor like this. If you forgot to make it before Pesach, then what should you do? If the first night Pesach is a Yom Tov without being a Shabbos, then it's okay. You can make salt water. If it's a Shabbos as well, then you have a big problem. You should make it not so harsh, the salt water. You should do it with Shinui, etc. And Mishnah mentions this Gemara that if you make 2/3 salt and 1/3 water, it's forbidden on Shabbos. One year I forgot to make salt water. What happened was I was making pan in the car, so I made a bowl, and I thought I added the salt. And I didn't realize, you forget, you can't see on the water so clearly the difference. I put it away in the fridge, all happy myself. Came to say tonight, we dip our potato radish inside, and it tastes like normal water. And I realized I hadn't put, so I had to put in salt, but you can't. You have to do it with derech shinu. Okay. You're not allowed to salt radishes and eggs on Shabbos. Why? Because people will think that you're allowed to tan. An egg you're allowed to, because an egg, when you salt it, it doesn't enhance it so much that it's permitted. In the beginning, I used to salt radishes. Why? I'm ruining it. Why? The sharper the radish, the better it is. So by putting in salt, it's not as sharp. So therefore, by adding salt, I'm actually weakening the pleasure of it. Therefore, I'm not doing anything bad. They would salt piles and piles of radishes, so it is an enhancement, so it is a kind of tanning. I don't salt it. I dip it in. And again, the Shiur brings this. That you're not allowed to make salt water on Shabbos, you're not allowed to salt your vegetable. You are allowed to dip your vegetable into salt. Because if you want to grow a cucumber, you get pleasure. I see people actually do it. They get pleasure from dipping everything into salt. So you get a slice of cucumber and dip it into salt, that's okay. The Moshe says, you're allowed to. But to put the salt on the radish, so Rashi, if you look at Rashi says that I don't salt two together. These 2 words of Rashi. The Shiur says, from here you see that Rashi understood that when you salt one by one, even that's okay. Because there's no difference between salting one by one or dipping one by one. The difference is only that if you salt a very lot, then it looks like you're a tanning process. But when you put salt on one, that's also okay. That's how the diet from Rashi. Okay. So I've about Chaviva, Esrog and Esrog, it's known a radish. Or baits and an egg. In molecule, if not for the outer shell, it would stay in the stomach forever. It seems that these foods are very, they get stuck in the digestive system. And if not for the fact that they have peels on them, Rashi says it's the white of the egg, and there's like a rind around the radish and the esrog. If not for that, if a person would eat it, a person would never relieve himself from it. Nobody ever drowned the Yam HaMelech. Nobody ever drowned the Yam HaMelech. Yosef said about this statement, the stone was turned over like we know in the Torah. And the words which you just said was also turned over. Why is it turned over? Because what you said doesn't make any sense. Because what did you just say? That nobody ever drowned. People don't drown kashur tova, but logs of wood drown. But even logs of wood don't drown. You shouldn't have said that people don't drown, which you can deduce that logs of wood do drown, because nothing drowns. I've actually floated on the Yam HaMelech. You can actually float there without even swimming. Not only logs of wood, that they never drown. A log of wood will never drown. Even people that they normally do drown. In the season, the Dead Sea.
Wood can't drown.
What?
Wood can't drown. I'm sure there must be some wood that can sink, no?
Wood doesn't drown in the water. Wood doesn't drown. Wood always
even like wet and heavy.
Okay. That wood doesn't. It's actually interesting that people do every so often drown in the Yam HaMelech. I think if what happens is by mistake they get too much salt water, they splutter and everything else. But normally they don't drown. What difference does it make if I don't ever drowns? Robin was walking behind Rav Yomi on the border of the Yam HaMelech. We're going to have a very lot of this. Minatel one's allowed to take medicine on Shabbos. The Rabbanon one's not allowed to. Why not allowed to take medicine on Shabbos? Because you might come to grind the medication. So not only they forbade you to take medication, they forbade you to do anything which is similar to medication. So now some people who the eyes were hurting them would take water out of the Yam HaMelech and rub it into the eyes. The question is that clearly an act of medicine and forbidden or not? It's okay to do that. Are you allowed to blink, open and close your eyes properly while you're adding salt water to the Yam HaMelech? Again, I should explain that what nafkimin is. The Gemara is saying that nobody drowned the Yam HaMelech. The Gemara is saying the Yam HaMelech is got so much salt water that it actually has medicine capabilities. Since it has medicine capabilities, therefore, a person might use it to heal the eye. So therefore, the Gemara says, yes, that is permitted as long as you don't blink. Sometimes they say the name of master, sometimes the name of okra. But Shavai Mishved Avod Shmuel Levi. Omi, they would say, Chad Oma, Yain B'Secha Yain, to put wine inside the eye also. People put wine into the eye to make it better. That's forbidden. Why is that forbidden? Because it looks like medicine. Everybody about this is going to be the defining question, which we're going to have dozens of times. If it looks like what you're doing is only for medicine purposes, it's forbidden. Al Gava Ayin Mutter, to put wine on top of the eye is mutter, because that doesn't look like medication. B'chadoma Wake Tofel, spit, which Rashi explains has no taste, meaning spit, which is from a person who's not eaten anything that morning. So the spit has been in his mouth all night without eating anything, so it's got no taste. Maybe explains that people don't like to put spit on top of the eye. They only do it for medicine purposes. Therefore, it's a right that you do it for medicine. Okay, now the Gemara says, so we have two statements. One about wine, one about spit. The Gemara tries to establish who said which. Did the father of Shmuel say, which one did the father of Shmuel say, and which one did Levi say? The Gemara says, this time, let's prove that the father of Shmuel, the wine on top of that, in the eye is also on top of the eye is mutter. A person is allowed to dip his bread into wine, but no, the Shabbos. A person that has eyes hurting him, so what he should do is dip his bread in wine and let it dribble on top of his eye. The Shmuel Levi man, who would Shmuel have heard such a thing? Of course, he heard it from his father. Is a raya that father was one who spoke about wine. The Tamech, according to the same logic, the Shmuel also spoke about spit, and he said that's forbidden. The Shmuel man, who did he hear that from? If he heard that also from his father, again, there are two statements: one about wine, one about spit. Wine on top of the eye is permitted, in the eye is forbidden. Spit on top of the eye is also forbidden. The Gemara wanted to say that the father of Shmuel said one, and therefore Shmuel must have got it from him. Says the Gemara, if Shmuel got that from him, but Shmuel also made the other statement. And if you say all he ever heard was from his father, so Levi said none of them. Shmuel heard one from his father, one from Levi. But in Yadina, we don't know which one's from his father, which one's from Levi. Kiloin is a kind of medicine, it's called kilo, which helps eye ache. A person is allowed to soak it in water until a person doesn't see the medication on its own. When no snagabai ain't of the Shabbos, put on his eye, and you don't have to worry about it. You're allowed to put it without worrying about it. So let's see the second line of the wide lines of Rashi. For the person himself, he's not going to start grinding on Shabbos. Again, why do we forbid a person to do medication on Shabbos? Because if we allow him to take paracetamol, so that he thinks to himself, oh, I'm allowed to do medicine. He'll get so involved in healing himself, he'll go and grind to more medication. But if we force him to soak the medication from before Shabbos, he will know that this medication was permitted because he prepared it before Shabbos. Other medications forbidden. Oh, what about everybody else? Everybody else that sees him, they think they're not taking medication because all they see is wine because he soaked the medication in wine. Rabbi Lieberman in Gate said, told me about this Gemara that he uses this Gemara all the time. He's constantly busy with this Gemara. Every Erev Shabbos he takes paracetamol and he grinds it down into a small bowl of sugar. And he takes other medication and he puts it inside peanut butter. And every week people come to him if they've got, let's say, a headache or other medications. And he says to them, look, you can have this spoon of sugar. It's got inside it some paracetamol. He gets very busy with it. The reason is, as we just explained, once you've soaked it into something else, and this is a big headache, people can't be bothered preparing it for Shabbos. But really, halachically, this is the best way. If somebody, many times she'll say, can I take paracetamol on Shabbos? I've got a headache, etc. It's always very hard to know, because really, you're only allowed to if a person's nifel and mishkov. Nowadays, we're quite quick to take medication because we've got abundance of medication. So a person has to be aware that Ma'aseh Chazal made the Issa D'Rabbanan not to take medication. So if you just do a little bit of preparation, it's not that hard, you could actually have medication on Shabbos. All you have to do is make sure that nobody around can tell it's medication. Even if you tell people, it doesn't matter, as long as it doesn't look like medication. So if you're having a spoon of sugar and everybody knows that inside that spoon of sugar there's paracetamol, it doesn't matter. And furthermore, you have to do something to prepare it. And that way, if a person needs to lose it, if any kind of medication you're not sure about, that's what you can do. So now the Gemara says a bit more. Ba'alevoi. Ba'alevoi was in front of Ma'okva. Chazed Avimoitz Posach, he was taking this kilovim, and at the same time was blinking, was opening and closing his eyes. That Shmuel never permitted. To start blinking with this is forbidden because everybody can see that it's medication. Biana sent a message to Ma'okva. Send me some of the eye medication. As we said, Shmuel was a doctor. Send me some of Shmuel's eye medication. So we replied to him as follows. I'll send you the medication. Why? No. You shouldn't say I'm stingy. If I don't send you the medication you asked me, what would you say about me? I'm stingy. But you should know. This is what Shmuel used to say. A drop of cold water in the eye in the morning. In the eye, this is. A drop of water in the eye in the morning. And washing your hands and feet in warm water at night from all other medication. And that's why even on Tisha B'Av, for example, after you dry your hands from Negel Rasa, you can rub your eyes when they're a tiny bit damp, because it's very, very good to put a drop of cold water in your eyes every morning and to wash your hands and feet with warm water every night. And that's better than all the eye medication in the world. It's better than all medication in the world, a drop of cold water in the morning and hot and cold water at night. Hot water at night for the hands and the feet. Okay, the next one continues a bit longer, so we'll stop here. I have to warn you all that the next Gemaras are all about these kinds of medications which we do not do and don't make sense to us. And many of the ingredients, I looked in the article themselves and they write, they do not know the names of these ingredients. And even the names that they give, I've never heard of. Have you ever heard of a herb called rocket? Have you ever heard of a herb called rocket? Rocket leaves. Rocket leaves? You heard of such a thing? You eat them? Oh. So it's a medication. Did you know that?
Or we can wait for Elianovic to come.
It seems it's a very good medication. I've never eaten rocket leaves.
No.
But there's a lot of medication and a lot of names. I'm going to go quite a good steady speed up through it because it is very hard to gain from it. Now, it's this Gemara about the kilovim, which is soaked in wine, so we've got an halacha l'maisa from it, for paracetamol, which you grind it. Anything which got no halacha l'maisa, and I do not know them, and all the different colors and tastes and things, it's a challenging Gemara. Anybody got any questions? But tomorrow night, Mr. Hashem is going to be telling us the day weather permitting, but we've been told the weather is going to be good. And the Mitzvah will continue in the garden for the foreseeable future because I see that there isn't really a big request to change venue. Those who really do want should contact Tolly. And 4th of July, that's why 4th of July is American Independence Day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why? It's covered the American Independence Day.
What's on the 4th of July?
Ah, that's what they're changing the regulations. Okay.
We have
I thought maybe what to. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
We're sorry about the fact it didn't get uploaded. Actually, it did get uploaded straight away on Shabbos at Friday afternoon. It was on private. I never realized that's a thing. So then it will need to change. Very good. Okay, Atzlacha with everything. Have a very good week. Atzlacha with everything. Oh, I mean to end it, yes. Okay, actually, I want to look up a few things. Good night. Atzlacha with everything.